we're standing by for a live feed from the People's National Party press conference, live from the People's National Party headquarters in Kingston, Jamaica, with Mr. Damion Crawford, opposition spokesperson on education.
Good
Stand by.
morning. My name is Damion Crawford. I am the shadow spokesperson for education and training. And I thank you for joining us this morning, where I will seek to expound on the opposition's position as it relates to the remuneration for the public sector workers in particular, based on my position for teachers in particular. Our very competent spokesperson on finance, Julian Robinson, will be speaking in Parliament on Tuesday and on Thursday, I'm sorry, and I'm sure he will also expound on the opposition's opinions as it relates to the other areas of the public sector that has yet to be in agreement. We thank you for joining us. We thank the members of the media for being present both here and online. And for those watching, we thank you. We will make a brief presentation. Thereafter, we'll be willing to field questions and to answer to the best of our ability those questions. So, as I said earlier, like many other stakeholders, the People's National Party is extremely concerned of the government's inability to reach to some level of consensus with some of the most important groups within the public sector, namely teachers and the police, who are currently not in agreement. The teaching group for which I have interactions, the country are now being bullied, in our opinion, by the government with half truths and baseless accusations that has become the key indicators of negotiations that's been held without good faith. As the teachers continue to lobby for nothing less than a livable wage, we encourage them not to be dissuaded by untruthful statements being posited by the government that if the agreement isn't reached by mid-March, then the government will not be able to make payments lump sum of the back monies owed to the teachers. Indeed, the Minister of Finance and the government is quite aware that there are simple remedies to the situation which has been used for decades, including by this current minister. Firstly, the ministry and the minister should and could place funds currently available in escrow, which will which is facilitated by the law, which essentially states that all funds must be spent in the year budgeted, except as is provided by law, which an escrow should qualify. It would mean, therefore, that the funds currently held by the government could be placed from this budget 2022-2023 into escrow and have no impact on the budget 2023-2024. Additionally, the minister can place the funds within a designated contingency within the 2023-2024 budget to be disseminated at the point of agreement whenever that is. This again has been used time and again within our budgetary allocations when there's a no negotiations to be taking place. Finally, we could always have an announcement of a supplementary budget with allocations and reallocations as necessary, as has been done 4 times last year by the same minister and multiple times before by this ministry. So this again is another example of government badness, which we ask the teachers not to be swayed by this effort to have them to leverage their current financial circumstances and the knowledge that the teachers are going through difficult times with the actions that the monies that are owed to the teachers in back pay, not a gift from the government, but owed to the teachers by their willingness to delay their increases over the last 2 years, that teachers should not be made to be forced in agreement because the government is playing hardball as to how monies will be paid over. Indeed, having had conversation with the leader of the People's National Party, a legal luminary in his own right, the People's National Party is willing to commit to teachers and other members of the public sector to offer whatever legal services that are necessary if they are being unfairly and unduly treated by the government, which have multiple options to have negotiations in good faith and have the funds available for lump sum payment if it is so desired. Additionally, the weakness of the government's proposal is adequately captured in the fact that the key selling points as are one-off payments, and two, pension benefits. It should be made clear to our teachers that on both counts, there will be additional benefits if a reasonable salary package is negotiated. Further, why would a teacher sacrifice 240 paychecks over the next 20 years so as to gain one paycheck now, or to sacrifice 40 years of effort for a immaterial benefit for 10 to 15 years in pension, which, by the way, they now have to contribute 5% of their salary. Additionally, we find that the accusations being posited by unions, including a statement made by the Minister of Finance in his presentation in Parliament yesterday, that there may be accusations of playing politics with negotiations. We find that these are unreasonable for the persons who are fighting for reasonable remuneration. It therefore is our opinion that the accusation and suggestion of politics is baseless. Indeed, the numbers does not support the minister's or the Jamaica Labour Party's accusations. The last vote of teachers negate this claim, as of the 585 delegates that voted, 560 voted no. This is 96% would have voted no. There is no way a government with 42 seats and a clear majority in parliament could reasonably assume that 96% of any group would have been politically motivated to vote as they have. Additionally, there is no basis to reject logic and to move to malice when there is sufficient logic for teachers to be resistant of accepting what has been posited and put forward to them. The areas of discontent can be seen on the graph that we have here. The first slide here is showing the current situation that the teachers are enjoying, quote unquote, or the current salaries. The NIS is 3%. The pension, which is a recent phenomenon, is 5%. So therefore, there was a time 3-4 years ago that the teachers, through their negotiations, would have saved that 12,500 that is now being taken for pension. Additionally, there were certain allowances for their basic salary. So the minister keeps comparing the basic salary with the new basic salary and ignore what the allowances that have now been canceled, or what they say absorbed into the pay, would have caused. So the current gross salary of a teacher, when they have their basic salary, their special teacher allowance, and their books and software allowances, would have been $182,941 gross. The deductions, as is for all persons who are employed, are as listed here, and the pension scheme deduction is also listed here. So what we have here is a net salary of $151,596 per month. That is their current situation. Now, because of the multiple efforts that has been made by government to ask teachers and the public sector in general to hold strain, this in itself was insufficient at the time of conversation. Just yesterday, the minister tried to make a point by showing the levels of increase teachers receive, or quote unquote accepted, over the last 10 years. That should not be a basis for accepting the new year. Indeed, having held strain for the last 9 years is a reasonable reason for teachers to be asking now for a livable salary. If we look to the next slide, we will see what is being proposed. So if you should remember, what their current net salary was is $151,000. What is being proposed is $174,000. So simple mathematics suggests that as is, they are recommended that the teachers will receive a measly $23,000 more. Now, we have seen some teachers that indicate that this salary is insufficient for their current living expenses. It is no comparison with other people, etc. On the absolute, teachers are finding it impossible to survive with $174,000 per month. So they are basically being asked to pay mortgage. A recent photograph on the internet presented by a teacher suggested that her mortgage was $46,000 in and of itself. That would be, I must posit, equally easily another $5,000 higher, because the government, through the Prime Minister, have decided to remove the 1% reduction in NHT interest rates that is posited to teachers and other public sector workers. So this salary doesn't stand alone from the Ministry of Finance, but many other benefits to the public sector, and in particular teachers, have been removed, causing for increase in costs to be faced by these teachers. So what we're seeing here is that while the basic salary seem to have taken a big jump from 138 to 220, because they have removed all the benefits that used to exist, the actual take-home pay has basically moved by a measly $23,000. So this also is a point of consideration from the teachers who are saying that at the end of the day, what is their basis of comparison is the net salary and not their gross or their basic salary. The teachers have also made it clear that the government seems to be unaware and incapable to understand how people analyze their salaries. A person with reason will analyze their salary by looking at their effort as compared to their past effort, their current effort, their risk that is being associated, as well as their growth potential. Within the teaching framework, there is not a lot of growth potential because after moving to the senior teacher, there's only 2 or 4 or 3 spaces within any school for the administrative employees, which include the vice principal and the principal. So if you have that reality there, what we're finding is the gap between the administrative employees and the classroom employees would be negative to the education outcomes of Jamaica, as there is no inducement for classroom teachers to seem to be admin individuals. And here we are already facing a problem of losing classroom teachers to overseas entities. And now we're going to be losing classroom teachers to admin activities because of that gap that exists. But in addition to the gap that exists, there is a lack of understanding of what the teachers are putting in so that they can get a master's degree, so that they can get a PhD, all of which are not being remunerated by the government going forward. Before this, a person who went to study and got their master's would have gotten a jump in their salary. Before this, a person who went to university and got a PhD would have gotten a jump in their salary. The government is saying that that effort is not worth remuneration when constant improvement is a requirement from the new teaching bill that is before the parliament. So before the parliament, the government is requiring for teachers to consistently improve. However, in the remuneration, the government is giving no consideration to those efforts of improvement. To this extent, we believe that it is an unfair proposal from that aspect and that standard. There's also a misunderstanding of the circumstances that we face because we are in a competitive state for teachers. We have lost more teachers in the last year than ever before, and the numbers will show that. Additionally, many schools have complained that even in December, they have lost more teachers. Um, I think it was Central High this Sunday that had 20 advertisements for openings in the last Sunday paper. I don't want to be quoted incorrectly, but a secondary school in Jamaica, had 20 positions open for persons to apply for those positions because our teachers have been migrating and leaving the classroom, migrating to other teaching entities overseas, but also migrating to other industries based on their inability to survive. So if the government is finding that education is of great importance, it would mean that the government should ensure that we remain competitive as a society to maintain our best teachers and also to maintain our experienced teachers. This is one of the greatest concerns that the opposition has, because when we look at the proposed remuneration, there is very little compensation for experience. As is, a person with 14 years to 17 years experience, greater than person B in bond 4, will be receiving no more than $200,000 per year in gross salary. So if you divide that by 12, you're going to be getting 200,000 divided by 10, that's 20,000, about 12,000, about 14,000. So therefore, much less than 20,000 is being granted to a person with 14 years greater experience. So that level of dissatisfaction will only cause for greater encouragement for greater migration out into the United States, England, and other spaces. While it is that we might not be able to match those entities with the absolute salary, the relative purchasing power that a person have in Jamaica is too far behind the relative purchasing power that a person can earn in the United States. And we believe that the Ministry of Finance, in partnership with the Ministry of Education and the Prime Minister, should take these things into consideration while they are making these current proposals. So, what do we believe next? What do we believe should happen? We're seeing here where the current proposal for a trained graduate, which is the vast majority of teachers in Bond 4, this is $2.5 million per year. That is what worked out to 174,000 per month. Next. So I think the start of the conversation should be a gross salary of no less than 291,000. This was seen by the persons who indicate their current spend, including a mortgage of 46,000. They didn't have a car loan, including food of 50,000, which is about $12,500 per week. A person with 2 children can easily spend that per week. That included transportation, but not a car loan at that point. Those are reasonable numbers. We believe that a 291,000 gross salary is what is a reasonable starting point for the conversation that we have going forward. So a $291,000 per month starting point for the Bond 4, we propose is a reasonable starting point. Within that band is approximately 20,000 teachers. And so our calculations suggest that it would cost an additional $19 billion approximately for that conversation in Band 4. So if we should move to that amount, it is by context only a quarter of the additional amounts the government collected, even not expecting that amount in 2022-2023. So the government collected approximately 80 billion more taxes than they expected, and what is necessary to pay the teachers a reasonable salary will be only $19 billion more. This is necessary because it is unfair, in our opinion, and in my opinion, that any group, including teachers, taxmen, or any other group, should be asked to sacrifice into perpetuity and to subsidize the government's effort to run a balanced budget or the government's effort to deliver on other services. The teachers, they do have their own obligations. They do have their own rent, their own mortgage, their own children, their own university fees, their own student loan, none of which has been forgiven, none of which has been considered. Indeed, the People's National Party in the last 4 months have made recommendations for a 5-year staggered forgiveness of 5% of student loan that has been ignored. We have asked for a special NHT that has not only been ignored, but reversed by removing the special NHT. We have asked for considerations for tools of trade, in particular internet expenses, that has been ignored and has not been carried forward. We have asked for a 5-year concession period to maintain teachers within the classroom, a additional 5% each 5 years, that has been ignored. So the general reality means that the teacher should not be asked to sacrifice further, having been asked to sacrifice under the debt exchange, having been asked to sacrifice under the JDX, having been asked to sacrifice under the IMF agreement, having been asked to sacrifice in the last 2 years, should not reasonably be asked to sacrifice themselves and their families into perpetuity with a salary that is not within the livable range. The teachers also have undocumented expenses, one of which must be highlighted, that is the welfare of students. And so the environment created by the government, especially with the limited contributions to the PATH program, has caused for teachers to be that middle ground for welfare. And it will be very difficult for an adult not to contribute to a hungry child that you interact with over the last 5 years, almost every day of the week. And so many teachers are losing ten to $15,000 in just making contributions to students incapable to afford lunch, incapable to afford bus fare, and incapable to pay exam fees. So in essence, we believe that the government should, one, give consideration to experience as well, give consideration to benefits for experience, reasonable benefits, give consideration to reasonable benefits for educational exposure, and to start our conversation with our teachers at no less than a gross salary of $291,000. We remind the teachers that there is no truth to the fact that government will be incapable to pay in a lump sum if they are not in agreement. However, if there's any avenue that they can find within themselves to reach to an agreement with the government, we encourage the teachers also to reach to that agreement, to reach to that state. And I make myself available to both the teachers and the minister to have conversations as to how best we can reach to some middle ground where the teachers can survive, the school system can continue, and the country can continue on its path to economic recovery. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Senator Crawford has just concluded his presentation. You're invited to submit your questions in the chat or indicate by raising your hand, and we'll open the mic for you to pose a question to Senator Crawford. Senator Crawford, a question here. They're asking, what do you make of the protests island-wide by teachers being conducted? Is this an indication that the teachers have reached their tipping point with the government?
In my opinion, the protests that are happening now is based on a accumulation of frustration. The accumulation of frustration includes the mishandling of the education entities, which cause for teachers to be finding it more difficult to be successful in their delivery of their education efforts. For one, they don't have the necessary books available to this point. Some schools have only gotten 20% of their rental books to this point, with exams around the corner. And for many who were to receive workbooks for PEP, some students did not receive their workbook for PEP. So that is one area of frustration. The second area of frustration clearly is their own remuneration, and that is what has been the final straw for the teachers who are now out there demonstrating. And to some extent, unfortunately, positing a counter stance to the persons who are not in the fight, or the persons who are their partners in the fight, the JTA being their partner in the fight. The teachers are now blaming the JTA for what the government has made as their proposals. The JTA have held out to this point on behalf of those teachers. So the teachers are frustrated, one, with the lack of information, with the untruthful communication, and also with the threat that has been given that the money is owed to them. That is what back pay is. Back pay is not a gift of remuneration. It is monies owed to you that you agreed not to take up front for whatever reason. So the government, being incapable to pay at the time, is now saying we owe you some money for the effort that you put in and the agreements that you made. The government has created frustration with the teachers, acting as if the back pay is a gift and that they will then make punishment for that back pay. We have information coming out of some teaching groups that there are members within the teaching fraternity that are pressuring the teachers to accept the lump sum back pay now, only so as to properly prepare themselves to migrate, and not for the long-term existence within the teaching profession. So there are some persons that are saying, we don't need to further consider what we get every month or every year after this, because we will not be present after this. These are things that the government must consider, and those teachers that are willing to stay are the ones that are most concerned about the lack of remuneration and the lack of conversation that is being happening between themselves and the government as it relates to truthful conversation.
Another question, apart from a livable wage, what other incentives would the PNP, if they were in government, offer the teachers in this negotiation?
We made a fulsome communication on the last conversation we had about the about the migration of teachers, and those proposals remain consistent. For one, we believe that there should be continuously monthly the payment of the internet bill, because access to information is access to education. And it is my opinion that internet is a tool of trade for teachers, and that should be considered. We also suggested that every 5 years, there should be a 5% concession on motor vehicle, so that a motor vehicle can be more affordable to a teacher. It costs the government nothing to offer a concession, because the government would not have received that income if the purchase was not made. We further asked for there to be a continuation of the reduction in the GCT, in the NHT interest rate, so that teachers can continue to benefit, and a 5% reduction in their student loan every 5 years for which they stayed within the teaching profession to encourage longevity. So we had a multiplicity of proposals, but most importantly, we believe that the gains that we have made, having asked teachers to make multiple sacrifices, should be considered at this point to be a time of returns for our teachers, and by extension, a um, gross salary of 291,000, I believe, is where our starting position will be as the People's National Party. If they can go to 270, 275, I think the teachers might be willing to accept that, knowing where we are. But I believe a gross salary of 291 is a reasonable proposal, and I think the PMP would have made that proposal to the teachers.
Thank you. Anthony Log of TVJ is asking, he said, some would argue that the image you made reference to with the teacher outlining her expense is far reached. How would you respond to that?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question about being far reached, as in if the numbers proposed. If you're saying that the numbers proposed were not reasonable numbers, I will ask for just an ability to look at these numbers on my phone. So the numbers that were being proposed, and we're assuming this is an adult being a teacher, and also not only an adult, that this person has two children. A mortgage of $46,000 is not a far reach mortgage. Most of us have mortgages much greater than $46,000. I would propose to you that this mortgage might be the teacher's portion of her mortgage, or his mortgage with his wife or her husband. So that is not a unreasonable. Lunch for two children, that is at 40,000. So that's $20,000 per child over 4 weeks. So that is $5,000 per child. So that is about $1,000 per child. That again is not unreasonable. Most of us are within the bracket of $600 to $1,200 per child. And let us agree that lunch might include other costs such as transportation. Groceries at $50,000, that is for the month. So if this is a teacher with two children, it would suggest that they're consuming about $12,500 per week. A week have 7 days, so that is about $1,500 per day, or $1,800 per day. So if they're consuming $1,800 per day for 3 people, that's $600 per person. For 3 meals, that's $200 per meal. So that doesn't seem to be extensive as well. The market for 10,000 again doesn't seem extensive. That's $2,500 per week for fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. Gas and traveling, $20,000. They have 3 people in the household, so they're looking at $8,000 for per person for the month, $2,000 for the week. The taxi fare, therefore, going and coming is about $500 per day. That is not extensive either. Lunch for the teacher, a lunch easily is $800. They're working for 20 days, so they put $20,000, $800 for 20 days. That is 800 times 20, $16,000. They put 20,000 again, because maybe some children are begging them the other 4,000. So they have to buy 2 lunch on some days as a past persons with that experience. And light and water at 30,000. Everybody knows that light and water is within itself. Now, when you look at this, they are already in a negative of 41,000, and none of those seem to be exorbitant costs moving forward. We also have that reality of many single parent households. So some of those persons who are single parent teachers would have had to multiply this by a factor of maybe 1.2 or 1.3 times. And so therefore, I would posit, if the argument that these are exorbitant costs, that there's nothing to suggest based on my experience and based on the average Jamaican experience that these are exorbitant costs.
That is it. Senator Crawford is available to take further questions, either now or later. You can reach out to us here at the communications unit and we'll arrange the interviews for you. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.